What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Deconstruction Zone. It has been a little bit, but I am excited to be joined by some friends. But if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I am really bad at introductions. So I want to let you guys do your introductions. And so, Katie, why don't we start with you? Haddon, we'll have you go next. But
Sure.
just kind of introduce yourself, who you are, and maybe how we know each other.
Yeah. I'm Katie Givens Kime, and I'm a Presbyterian pastor. And I'm lucky to know Danny through Sinai and Synapses Fellowship, which is, and you've probably described that before. It's for leaders and leading voices. We like to compliment ourselves about being
Yeah.
leading voices, but whatever voices in faith and science and the way those conversations intersect or collide. And my role is that I am host of Day One, which is a radio broadcast and podcast that has been going on for 80 years. What has happened in those 80 years is that every single Sunday there is a sermon broadcast. Starting in 1945, it was, and going forward, it's been diverse voices from American mainline congregations and denominations. So um, it's had ups and downs, but it's still surviving. And today we are growing our podcast and digital audience. I am new in the role. And as of just a couple of years ago, the wonderful Peter Wallace did it for 20 years, and then Skip Shudidig did it for 20 years before him. So it's the last surviving one of these kind of radio shows and broadcasts. So and I couldn't do it without.
Oh, is that my cue? Okay. Here I go. Did I do good?
You
Uh,
did great.
I am Haddenkime. Our last names are the same on purpose. And so I am a composer and a sound designer and a songwriter, and I got a degree in writing music for films and somehow found my way into podcasting at a very early, like 2003, 2004
Okay.
stage, like a long, long time ago, back when, really the RSS feed was a new thing.
You can say you
And
did it before it was cool. Like
and
you were
before it was,
podcasting.
yeah.
You
Who was
did.
the dude who started? God, he was so big. He was on MTV. It wasn't Kurt Loder. It was
Carson
Adam.
Daly.
No, yeah. Well, no, pre Carson Daly.
Oh man.
Craziness. I'm old, is what
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying.
just
I'm
Yep.
gave
old as dirt.
I gave
Yeah.
my
And
age and your age in that.
yeah.
Yep. There it is, people. You did it.
And so, but yeah, I am I guess, the director of production, audio, and communications I wear those hats at day1.org. And I am also a professional pastor's husband and have been for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And so there's a little deconstruction of a situation right there.
Yep.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's great to be here, Danny. We,
Yeah.
loved having you on the show
Seriously.
recently, and we look forward to that, your episode airing in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. Also, I do think we'll have to get into the pastor's husband world because depending on people's denominational upbringing, like that is certainly things that
Right.
people have deconstructed. But I was talking to someone about day one, and so you said this in kind of passing. It's been every week for 80 years. That's true. I couldn't
Yes.
remember that. So how I mean, give a little bit of a brief summary. Like, do you
Sure.
know the origin story of like what the
Yeah.
impetus behind starting it was and how it's
Yep.
kind of evolved over time? Because I think
Yeah.
not a lot of things. I mean, I did this podcast for 100 consecutive weeks, and that's a
Wow.
That's a
long
lot.
time.
Yeah.
But it's not 80 years, right? And so that's a long time, right? So tell a little bit about like how they did this and
Yeah.
got there, and like what that journey has been like for them as an organization.
Yeah. So it started as the Protestant Hour. That's what it was called. The name was changed in the 2000s, but I'll get to that. So in 1945, April 1st, 1945 was the first broadcast, and basically some of the backstory there is that radio, of course, during World War I and II, had ascended in terms of just a technology that was available to all, was increasingly powerful, and evangelical um, pastors and preachers were doing a much better job of utilizing the radio. And mainline, as I'm using self descriptions, how they describe themselves, whether or not those categories still resonate or not.
Right.
mainline Protestant denominations, so the Lutherans and then the Presbyterians and the Methodists came in and said, brothers, because it was all men, we need to have more of a voice. It needs to be not just some theological representations of Christianity on the radio. And so we are gonna project our institutional power, because uh, power comes from authority coming from institutionalness in that time more than it comes from authenticity now. But age of authenticity is now. So they said, okay, we're going to select like one pastor. The Presbyterian Church gets 4 weeks, then the Episcopals get 4 weeks, etc. And money flowed in. And by so that was 1945. They just did the radio broadcast and it was going well. By the early 50s, they were like, oh, you know what, brothers, we need a TV studio. And so soon we'll be able to show you. We've just unearthed them from archives. Like there was a radio truck that said Radio Protestant Radio and TV Center, and it was broadcast from Atlanta near the Emory campus. They had a truck, they had posters, they had all kinds of things. And this was a sense of like, all right, we're going to tell the story of Christianity through technology, which is so funny to think of now.
Yeah.
Um,
But it
and
was innovative at the
mhm,
time, right? Like that
it
was like
was.
cutting edge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of my
bleeding
favorite
edge.
pictures is of children in hospital beds, like who look very healthy. It seems to be a posed picture. The date on it is like right around my parents' birthday, like 1953 or so. They're propped up in hospital beds in like a crib, and there's like four, and they have to all be under the age of 6. And there's a radio right in the middle of them, and they're listening to the Protestant Hour, which I just think is like, okay, so children are going to come hear the sermons too. But that is actually the story we hear from a lot of longtime listeners. We hear
Yeah.
that they have memories from like when they were children, like, all right, time to gather around, especially if we didn't get to church for some reason, time to gather around the radio and listen to the Protestant Hour on Sunday nights or Sunday mornings
Yeah.
or whenever it was airing in their area.
Well, I mentioned to my mother-in-law that I was on day one, and I'd given her the backstory of it, and she's like, "I remember that from when I was a kid." So, I mean, it's like
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
some level of connection. It is interesting. Like history is always such a critical eye, but it is interesting, like how culture changes because it probably was like very normative to like listen to it as a family because there was less Netflix and Hulu, and there's something about getting
Yeah.
your kids in front of it. And again, it was like for us now would be like that's nothing, but quite innovative probably in terms of like what was happening to get that there, um, and probably paved the way for where we are today. Like we don't have where we are without that.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. It was called, the name was changed in the 2000s to Day One, which
Okay.
because it was like, well, it's not an hour long. So why are we calling it the Protestant Hour? And Protestant Hour, there was a worry, and this was like 2000, 2001. There's a worry that that just wasn't compelling or appealing to anyone. That just wasn't pulling in new audiences. Because of course, by the time we got to 2000s, it was shoo, as
Yeah.
if, audiences declined in a major way from the 70s onward for the show. And they chose Day One, which sounds a bit like either it's the same name as a journal planner that you can get a really good app. It sounds like a multivitamin, or it sounds like something where it's like, okay, wait, do I type day1.org or do I spell it out? Both
Yeah.
should take you there. But it,
I thought it was a really good like which is now funny. Like I thought like 2000s like pop punk was what came to my mind. It's like a band. I was like I could see a
Nice.
band called Day One. It was what I first thought.
There we go.
Green Day, Day
Yeah.
One,
That's what
things
yeah,
like that.
like that
Yeah.
is truly where my mind went the first time.
Yup.
So it's been pretty ecumenical across, I mean, as far as at least mainline Protestants go, in terms because like mainline Protestants, even at least nowadays, don't always work together well. But one of the things, like even looking through like the archives of your sermons and the things you've had in there, it's like voices like myself, but then faces that I've seen before. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. They got this person, and then people of maybe more conservative, maybe more progressive, maybe more centrist. So have you yet, and will you ever branch out of kind of major or predominantly Christian
Yes.
voices, or like what is, or mainline voices? Like, what is your vision for where it goes in if you follow suit the next 18 years of your leadership or whatever as you get
I
20
love
years
it.
into this?
Yes. Great question. For one thing, we are clear as we make some big pivots into really investing in building not just we are not interested just in getting ears or getting eyes or getting clicks. We genuinely want to expand an audience that is
Mm,
meaningful. And so that is such a journey. And anybody, please email me if you have thoughts about like the best people or the best firms to help us do that. We're finding some great leads in that. But we find that a growing area for us is people who are Christian curious or spiritually curious. And it is not the case that it is hard to find a Christian sermon online. That's not a need we feel that's like empty. Like there's Christian sermons everywhere.
yeah.
And there's also Christian sermons that are preached from specific congregations. The thing that is unique about Day One is that they are intentionally preached to the public square. Like they are
Yeah.
preached to everyone at a certain moment in time. Like it's time bound, but then people, of course, can listen to it anytime.
Sure.
But we really try and have a diverse reflection of preachers whose names you'd recognize, preachers whose names you will now recognize because they preach so well. And we even would like to expand to lay preachers. We were really excited to have non-ordained folks who have
Okay.
leading preaching voices, like Sarah Miles. We had her on. She's amazing, and she's an author and a journalist, and she also led an Episcopal ministry in California that was really important for a while. But it's not a we are less interested in ordination creds, and we are more interested in like, can you from what tradition do you preach and speak, and how can that better showcase and provide compelling content and material for our listeners. And our listeners do love us staying in the tradition of Christian preaching. But to
Yeah.
answer your question, Danny, yes, we are excited. Like Day One will pretty much always be Christian preaching. But other things we could do. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think one of my friends who actually got me connected to the fellowship that you and I are part of, which I've actually never
Mhm.
talked about on the podcast, and so it is something we could get into more
Oh,
as well. But he's a rabbi, and I actually had him come out and preach at the Well, the church I pastor, maybe for sure under a year after we started, and he just preached on like Genesis 1:1 and talked about like the faithful interpretation and kind of our sibling nature of um, people a part of a similar faith. And it was really, it's still the most memorable sermon that's ever been given at our church. Like people still about it. It fit
Fantastic.
really well with like a lot of people that were deconstructing, a lot of people that were hurt by church, and then people that have been in church their whole life really loved it. And that was just to say, like, he was certainly not a Christian, but gave us a really interesting Christian sermon. Like he came in and preached to the context well, and still is like one of the most beneficial ones. And so I love that idea of like opening up to not just ordained voices, not just like voices of the people we've selected, but who are the people, especially in the where I
hmm
think religion is going. It's like there's a lot of really great voices
yes.
out there that are not certified by the bodies that have done that for the last hundreds of years, but have really prophetic and meaningful voices. And I think that's the work you guys get to be in, is trying to figure out like, how do we signal boost and elevate those voices for a story that's maybe better than people knew imagined, and getting those out
Yeah. Oh man, can we clip what he just said? That's like real good, and like use it as a promo because that was
Done.
awesome.
Well, I mean, I'll have to clip it and send it to you since you're on my podcast this time, but I'll
Oh,
send it to
darn it.
you. Yeah.
Not
Uh,
done.
Danny, I gotta say, like I was thinking about this deconstruction thing, and it is we are currently 8 days away from Haddon and my 20th year wedding anniversary. So it's I
Congratulations.
just
I
realizing that.
gotta go get a gift.
Yeah, yeah. So
No.
um I will say that marrying Haddon, who was unchurched when we dated. I was in seminary, and
Okay.
my best friend set us up, and I thought that was a terrible idea. And then she brought me into a crowd in Boston, and I was like, "Who's that guy in the back?" And she's like, "That's the guy I was trying to match you up with. Would you listen to me?" And so, but the key thing was then he and I, like this one evening, March 2003. Um, this one evening, we then walked away from the rest of the group. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to him. And so then he was like, "So what's your deal? Like, are you in seminary?" And I was like, "Oh, all right, here's where it falls apart.
Yeah,
Here's
it
where
is
it's
like the
all gonna
worst part.
die."
It's the
Like,
worst part about dating as a pastor is, like, having to tell people
man,
that's what you it kills conversations and relationships
kills it.
faster than
It
but it
kills
didn't.
it kills airplane conversation. Yeah,
No,
but I was like,
luckily
"All right."
I
He
was
was so
curious.
into it. He was so
Okay.
into it. Now, the things he thought about it, he was like, "So
Yeah,
you wear, like, monk robes and stuff?"
you just
Like,
walk around going, I just with candles in the abbey and
So,
stonework.
but the
hadn't you
deconstruction of my faith was so real in dating. Like, from the minute like, I was pulling apart and rethinking about everything I believed, and it's probably one of
Yeah.
the my favorite things in our marriage.
Yeah, and who you could probably date as a pastor, like, all those things, right? Like, that come with that.
Yeah.
So hadn't you didn't
Mhm.
grow up religious is what I
No, 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 no,
so what
no.
is your
I
because
was a
you have, like,
nun.
maybe yeah, so that's really interesting. So a lot of our folks are duns, though we certainly
Oh,
have a lot
nice.
of folks that listen that are in, the nun category, and so, like,
Right.
what has that been like for you? And I'm always interested to know why people opted in, and perhaps
Sure.
it was just dating Katie, or maybe there was something else, but, like, what
Yeah.
led to that, like, entry point? Because it is something that I mean, I don't think we talk about like, we talk to a lot to nuns, or
Yeah.
duns rather, people that have given up, but the people that have opted
Right.
into this is a really interesting crowd.
Yeah, and this first time I've heard guns and, duns, and I get it immediately. It was a circuitous route. My grandparents, I won't this will be fast. I know it sounds like it's not gonna be, but, my grandparents, basically became so, I don't know, oppressively Christian to my father that, he turned away from religion and, became what he says is agnostic. Katie and I believe that, he there may be more to it than that, but um, basically, he was very proud when at 6 years old, I turned to him while walking down the street and said, "Dad, what is that lowercase t I keep seeing on all these buildings?" He loved he loved that, and he tells that story very proudly,
Mm.
because he felt like he did something right, and perhaps he did because it was, basically I grew up, because you think your parents are, the gods of your life when you're
Yeah,
little, and so I grew up kind of believing that the church was there and filled with people who were, in it's evolved since now, but I'm just trying to get back to that very simplistic belief that church was filled with people who wanted to do the right thing but were usually, almost like a Three Stooges film, just kind of like trying to do something right, but getting caught up and sometimes doing the wrong thing,
yeah,
or the thing, and but they were people, and people, people are all forms of everything. And so I kind of kept an open mind. And then at one point, when I went off to Boston, I got a music degree at Berklee College of Music, and I met a guy there who was the Christian Scientist, and he. Because the Christian Science mother church is blocks away from, if you know Boston, it's right down Boylston. Wait,
okay.
right down Mass Ave. Ooh,
Is that
that's
so
bad. I'm losing my
is
creds.
is that the head I did not know. Is that, like, the headquarters of Christian
Yeah.
Science?
Yeah, the headquarters of Christian Science, it's called the Mother Church, and it's right there, you can't miss it. I mean, it's massive, and especially in the Back Bay of Boston, it's a really nice place. You can take your sandwich, and there's fountains, and, like, you can eat lunch, and, it's a nice place, to go. And I met a guy who was there and befriended him, and he was an older guy, and it was the first time, after I got to know him for a while. I mean, we were just going to movies, and I met his family, and we became family friends, with everybody, and music. He was a huge classical music, fan. Symphony Hall is right there, and so, if he had an extra ticket to a concert, I would come running down, to
Okay.
join him. And he said, "I don't like to. I would never do what I'm going to ask unless I have your permission. But can I pray for you?" And I was like, sure.
Yeah.
He said, "To me, it's like going into somebody's house and rearranging the furniture. I don't wanna do that unless I have your permission." And so I was like, basically, I love you and I trust you and you do you. If that's what you feel, then you have my complete permission to pray for me." And but you know, that securitist this turned into a long story. Okay. And then
It's a great story, so don't cut it's a great
oh,
story.
cut this is still pre-Katie. Okay. And so then at some point, oh yeah, I dated a okay, yes, I date honey, I hate to tell you this. There were other women before you.
Oh.
Oh,
What? It's
we don't
over.
I
We're not
know.
making it to
That's
20
it.
years.
You're not taking it. A couple
So
days
close.
shy. Um,
It all happened on Danny's podcast.
so
Deconstruction of Katie and Haddon's marriage.
she turned on yeah, this might be interesting, man. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm in music school and I'm learning the art of writing music for films. And I'm also working professionally in the theater scene of Boston, and you know, getting an actual working knowledge of Shakespeare and like you know, August Wilson and really great playwrights that are out there telling great stories and working on a team. It's fantastic. What I didn't count on was an ex girlfriend turning on Sunday morning on WGBH in Boston. They would
Radio.
broadcast radio. They would broadcast the sermon from the Marsh Chapel in Boston University. And on that, oh my goodness, who's the pastor? He was pastor at
Um,
Harvard Memorial, and he also
oh,
died.
African Gomes, Peter Gomes.
Gomes. So this dude, Peter Gomes, was preaching, and it was the and you know, we listened to it together, and it was the first time I realized this could be an art form, like, telling a story like that, walking people through the story and the jazz of it all, like, the point he came it was art, and I
Yeah,
realized that
Ta-da!
that might have been the first good sermon I ever heard, or that might have been the sermon that, you know, you could watch a million crappy films and think, "Oh, well, all films are this way," but then you watch a really
sure.
good one, and you're like, "Whoa, wait a second, this could be something new." And so, so I have to give credit to my ex-girlfriend and Peter Gomes for doing that. And it wasn't too much later, ditch the girlfriend, and we that I found myself walking with Katie down that street, and she said she goes to seminary, and I was very like, "Oh, okay, well, tell me about that," you know?
Yeah,
And it wasn't a complete I mean, if I'm sure that if she was maybe a different type of Christian, or something like that, I probably would have been turned off by that. But, no, she's very, I don't know, humble and searching and open and incredibly intelligent and um, beautiful and all the things, you know,
yeah,
all the things. And so, yeah, so that was my way in. I did have one other very um, formative story while, and this is quick. I was working on a show. I was working on Bat Boy the musical in Boston
okay,
way long time ago, and it was 2 in the morning, and everybody was running ragged, and the show was going to open. It was just one of these things where everybody was just trying to get this thing up and running, and everything was done. And all of a sudden, and I had an atheist friend later in my life say that he knew why this happened, but I'll tell you that afterwards if you're curious. All of a sudden, I'm looking down at the stage and I'm looking at all of these people swarm around like bees trying to put up the set or trying to hang speakers or whatever. And I heard a voice clear as day say, "If only you loved them as much as I love you." And I tell you what, that gave me at 2 in the morning all of the all of the strength that I needed at that point. Don't know where that voice came from, and I just nicknamed it my angel, but
yeah,
it was like somebody was talking in my ear, and maybe I was hallucinating because I was so tired. which is kind of what my atheist friend thought. But
Yeah.
but the feeling of it and also the call of it, if only you love them as much as I love you. And
Yeah.
it made me fascinated with people's stories at that point. And here we and cut forward. Thank you very much. I'll be here till Thursday. I think that I just took up the entire
No,
length of the
no.
podcast.
So that was such a good story, and I think and
Thank
I
you, Daniel.
appreciate you sharing both those things, and I think both of you have, like, really unique stories, right? And so, I mean, Katie, I'm making an assumption. Did you grow up pretty religious or, like, at least
I didn't I
marginally?
kind of like so far left, and that was so far left on the progressive thing that like saying Jesus at Grace was a little embarrassing. And so my journey was like, and I went to University of Wisconsin, which produced a ton of Peace Corps volunteers. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. And no, like producing pastors was not a thing. And so my journey, like probably the one distinctive part was I grew up churched
Okay.
loosely, but
But not hyper
yeah,
Christian.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So for the two of you, like I think there's got to be a little bit of a different like vibe, right? So like for you, it's like I grew up pretty left, but there was Christian adjacentness, and then you went into ministry. And on the other side, it's like you were praised for thinking a cross was a lowercase t, and
Yeah.
then like it became kind of a searcher and explorer, and had like some of these, even if you couldn't name what they were, like spiritually defining encounters
Yes.
that have then got you both to where you are now, where you guys are like public, outward facing voices and faces of Christianity today. And so, one thing Christian leaders don't do, however they get into it, is often like name things they've wrestled with or
Mm,
deconstructed, because there's this idea, at least in my sphere, that we have it all together, right? And so, and I'll say this a lot in my sermons, like, you don't have to agree with me. Or if I don't know something, I would never posture as if I know it. So I'm like, I'll tell you what this word says in Greek. But if there's been like disagreements over translation, I would never say it certainly says this. And so I try to create room
right.
for gray and share the things that I've deconstructed and the things that I've changed and where I am now. And so, Katie, like in your journey as a Christian and as a clergy person, and in day one now, which is certainly still as a clergy person, but in a different role, have you served in like local church as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you've
certainly.
had different capacities. Like, has there been anything over that journey that you've had to let go of? Maybe like a belief that you were given, um, by the denomination, by your parents, by just something you came to know on your own. You're like, where do they come up with that? Like, what have you maybe, if anything, had to release? You're like, man, this is not maybe actually of God and just something that I've had to deconstruct.
Yeah, I can name like the three sort of growing edge or sticky spots I've found myself in are because I believe easily. Like I just am like, of course that could be yes, okay. Like, but it also makes me very porous to
Yeah.
non-Christian beliefs, which I am never going to describe myself as anything but Christian. It'll take me my whole life to figure out what it is to be fully Christian. That's like more than a lifetime's worth of work.
Yeah.
And like what a human can even withhold stand. And there have been moments when dear mentors or others have sort of called me on like my porousness or my affinity to things and been like, Katie, it's like, you're like getting a little Gnostic is what you're doing. Like,
Yeah.
or like that I'm just being too a lot like I'm not respecting Christianity in the many shapes it can be by being a little too easy.
Yeah.
Um and mhm,
Before you go on, do you think and maybe this is where you're going, but
yeah.
this being porous, because I actually feel like I'm this way too a little bit. And maybe it's a common denominator of Christians, like we absorb things, or
Mhm.
we have the ability to bring that in. But do you see that currently as a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I've always felt like it's a good thing, and but it's that my ouch moments are when people have presented it or like shown me the way that it's limiting or the way that it actually isn't. No, Katie, like no, you can't. But I'm like, well, there's paradox. That's why everything can be the same, like completely different, opposite things can be true at the same time. And I believe that. I just do.
Yeah,
It makes the most sense. Carl Jung and what he said about the tension of opposites and like Christ on the cross and like that are we come closest to understanding God when we bear the tension between opposites and like what that has to do. Oh, I love that. I love
yeah,
that so much. Um I also can my bad habits are about overthinking it, or like, oh, here's a problematic thing. I will just think away around that. And that's probably what, so I got my PhD after serving in a congregation for a little while, and I at Emory, and I ended up getting it in pastoral care, not in preaching.
Okay.
It was also because I was just working so hard to wrestle with like some key things about where the truth really is, like about who humans are, like
Yeah.
psychology specifically, because yeah, so that's a big tension for me, or something that I'm constantly, I know that I'm having a wrestling point if it's like, if I look back at the moments in serving a church and like, man, I just constantly want to do one more class and teach yet another class about universalism versus particularism, like, and how other faiths, being Christian, does that mean other faiths are wrong? Like, so that was me working it out still.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say you're still working some of, because again, some people think pastors are not, right? Like, but it sounds like, and I'm a huge fan of the gray. I wouldn't say it's on your podcast, but on ours, our phrase we
Mhm.
often use is "bitches hate nuance."
I wish I would like to grow
uh,
day one to the
yeah,
place where we could say that.
yeah, it's probably, I shouldn't say it probably, but I do think it's very funny, and like I think
And
true
true.
for
Yeah,
me.
Yeah.
Like I am someone that like loves and embraces the gray. Like it doesn't give
yeah,
me a lot of tension. But again, somewhat maybe similar to you had. I didn't grow up super religious, and so
right.
the gray was kind of always my life. But similar to you,
Yeah.
Katie, like my life was like very socially progressive because my parents pushed back against like conservative right wing evangelicalism, which is what they perceived Christianity to be, at
Mhm.
least from like an ideological perspective. And so that was it. But so do you still feel like you're like wrestling with some of those things like in your day to day?
Yes, and I feel like I'm not called enough on that. Like I can be a little bit lazy on that because of my awesome job where other people come preach. I don't have to
Yeah.
declare what, like, I love it. And so I know that's something I got to keep an eye on. But like at its best, I love about day one that it can be genuine wrestling and opening of, we don't have guests talk to each other. So but there's common themes that come up across
Yeah.
episodes, but we I love to hope that we make a lot of room for doubt and places
Yeah.
where we don't feel sure. Um we hear from
Yeah.
our listeners the number one thing they want to hear is hope. Like they just need like a
Yeah.
get me through the week kind of thing, and a perspective on hope. We definitely hear that a lot. But we also hear, give me something hard. Give us
Yeah.
something robust and meaty.
Yeah, that's all so good. Something you said in there that I had not have I don't think I've ever thought about this, but thinking of like my own spiritual journey and like certain intersections of things, I've never deconstructed more, or at least wrestled with my beliefs more than when I started the well and have preached 40 to 52 weeks a year because I'm
Mm,
like daily presenting my thoughts in front of, or weekly presenting my thoughts. And when I was an associate pastor, or when I was just like coming into, like I preached once a quarter as youth pastor. I teach 12 times a year when I was a campus pastor,
mhm.
20 whatever times a year as an associate. And so there was enough like break where I could really curate these like safe things.
Mm.
And now when I'm doing it, like, right, can I write sermons? Some people spend like 30 hours a week. Some people write 10. I maybe do like 10 to 15, 12 hours a week writing my sermons. And so when I'm doing that every single week and turning around, like I'm like always wrestling with something, and I'm so interested in authenticity that I never want to put something out if I don't fully believe in it, or at least can say like this is where I stand on this. And so I've
Mm.
never thought about that like intersection of my own deconstructing of beliefs and me weekly proclaiming the gospel and how those things have kind of run into each other. So I appreciate you gave me a thought that I've never had before.
Well, and I hope you hearing that, Danny. I mean, like, that's what when I met you, if I may, like, I was like, oh yeah, yep, that dude's so freaking raw and like cares about, you prioritize authenticity. And then I was like, then I like sneakily like listened to one of your sermons. I listened to like 2 minutes and I'm like, oh man, okay, I'm gonna try and ask him in person before this thing ends if he'll preach on day one, because this is great. But like,
Yeah.
you, I mean, not to embarrass you, but Danny, your congregation's really lucky to have
You're
somebody
dr
who's
you're totally dreamy.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't hear it enough, so I appreciate you saying
yeah,
that,
there
Adam.
you go.
You're
They're
welcome.
lucky to have
Uh,
a preacher who is willing to just not to do the work, of preaching
Yeah.
what something they believe every week. Ooh, it's
Yeah.
hard. And
I
I've
will
always
say
wriggled out of it. It's great.
yeah, I'll tell you one of my church, like when you start a church, and every church has, but you get like church planting consultants. And I shared
Mhm.
something similar to this where they told me to essentially like attract the right kind of people. And I'm like, I only want the wrong people. But I remember I was like, hey, I want to ask the congregation's input, like ask them questions during the sermon, because like they're never going to remember what I say, but they'll remember what they say to each other. And I remember them telling me, like, "That's a terrible idea. Like, you're giving too much." He didn't say it exactly this way, but like, "You're giving too much power to the people, and you could lose control." And I'm like, "But what if that's what church is? Is like turning it back over to everybody, and like we're in this thing together." And it's helped me as a preacher, but it's also like helped our congregation because like I'm a fine preacher, but people don't remember what they hear 2 weeks later, right? And but I
Mm.
do know still over the course of our 4 years existing, like, people still remember conversations they've had with each other, and so sometimes I find my job is just to, like, facilitate their good conversations, whether that's on their ride home or in the pews when or seats when we're having, like, a conversation, so but I appreciate that. I'm a words of affirmation guy, and so I will always take them. I give them freely, but always appreciate when people give me words of affirmation.
I like the gray thing that you're talking about,
Yeah.
and that space. I mean, what's another way that we could define that? Is it the area of life where we are uncomfortable, but there's possibility? I mean, I think a lot of people run from the gray. Do you run from the gray?
Yeah, I don't run from the gray, but I fully agree with you. I think it's like where the most, and I've struggled with like analogies for it because
Mm,
when it's black and white and there's this middle, it feels like you're non-committal or you're
right.
wishy-washy or whatever. But I would wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah.
And I had a preacher friend of mine actually went to Candler at Emory, and
Cool.
he had talked about when he was in the UK, like when you get off the subway mat and get onto the subway or whatever they call it, it has
The
like all the
tube.
signs. Yeah, the tube. It says
Yeah.
"Mind the gap,"
Yep. Mind the
uh,
gap.
and like I think that is he used that as an analogy of like jumping over this liminal space between where you were and where you are, and like you kind of have to be aware of it, and in
Mm,
your awareness of it, it gets you into something more profound. And I think if we didn't see it as like a place we sit forever, but we didn't see like the black or the white as like the beginning or the end, but
right.
it's kind of all of it is a part of this journey. Like it makes every part far more meaningful. But like oftentimes we see like start line, finish line, and the gray is this like the crappy part in between. But it's like, what happens if that becomes just an interesting part of the jump into where like God is leading you in your
I
belief?
mean, what if that's everything? What if that's life? What if that's time? What if that's the gray is the I was just reading this article and it was something that we were taught in music school about the Indian music tradition out of India, right? They have this instrument called the tampura, which you've heard before if you've listened to like any Indian music. Go into an Indian restaurant, there's going to be a tampura, and
Okay.
it's basically a drone. It's a guitar looking instrument, like almost like a sitar. It's in
Yeah.
that family, but all it does is drone. Kind of just does like, and that's a horrible tempura. So you should check out what, but it's a rich, deep drone, and it only plays one note, right? One note, the entire piece of music. I do believe it can be tuned up and down, but I do believe that if I'm getting this right, the player of the tempura has to stay on that note throughout the entire piece of music. I say this all to say that check this out, man. This was to me, this to me is something that is just jazzing around in my head as a deconstruction of Christianity in a way that in that musical tradition, the tempura holds the home tone, the non-moving um, state of profound being in that tradition. It doesn't move; it stays, and a lot of times, the the most amazing musicians on the tempura spend their lifetime, making sure that this is a pure, beautiful tone, that it doesn't move up by 1 hertz or down by 1 hertz. It's perfectly in tune, right? So it takes a lot of musicianship to do. So while that's going, there is on top of it an adventure. All the other instruments, because the tempura is playing one beautiful solid tone, all the other instruments are able to go on an adventure and run these scales, run these melodic patterns, these things. Now, there's a huge amount of language that is used to describe it, which is very different than Western music theory and this and that. But the idea that there is a home tone, to me, could be a church, it could be a
Yeah.
belief, it
Home
could be a
tone.
family,
Ooh.
a mother tone, as I've also heard it called. I'm sure there's actual language to define that. Um, but then you go on your thoughts, on your adventure. You have
Yeah.
your back and forth while that stays underneath what it is. That's a deep. I don't. To me, the gray is an exciting place, and the gray is actually a place where you can go on an adventure and you can realize that what the journey is the end, you know, that the questions sometimes are the answers in themselves. I mean, it's kind of weird,
Yeah.
but music gets beyond language, and I find that it's a beautiful thing. Language, so gorgeous and very limiting, and that is just a way that I feel like we could hear if we listen to what are called ragas or talas, I believe is the other music form. Anyway, Indian music might have something for us. It for some reason, the Tampura article I just read, it reminded me when you said the
Yeah.
gray, and I
Well,
really dig it.
you got me thinking even just a moment ago when you talked about the first sermon you had ever heard that like really
Yeah,
resonated, like sounded like art for the first time, right? Like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what like art and music does. Like it takes us to a place where it's like it's more than the words. It's like the story that's
Mhm.
curated and like what it does to our heart, mind, and soul. And like a bad sermon just hits our ears, but like a good one captures our imagination. And that's like what music and art
Yes,
across
sir.
the board does. And I think that's I mean, sometimes, like, we minimize the art of preaching, right? And we just make it like a practice, but in many ways, it's at its best is just capturing the imagination of
Yeah.
God's people to envision what life could and should be like,
Oh yeah.
and that's what the I mean, so I think that's a really, really good analogy.
Oh, thanks, man.
So when you guys so, y'all are part of the Reformed tradition, right? That
Yes.
you
Yes.
Presbyterians would be Reformed. Um, Haddon, you've married into this though. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you didn't like grow up Reformed, and so and I didn't either. Though my wife grew up Methodist, and then left that to a more Reformed tradition because it provided more structure and more like value in the Bible and more things that the Methodist Church at that time just wasn't providing for her. And I would say for my wife, the Reformed tradition, though she doesn't subscribe to all of its beliefs, was probably the time she experienced the most growth in her faith because it gave her things that Methodism didn't give her.
Ah.
And so for you as someone that as married into this, like what
Mhm.
is the best and maybe even worst of Reformed theology given you? Or has it only been good or only been bad? But what has it given you? Or has it been great? Like what has it given you along the way?
So curious how he's gonna answer this.
I've
That's why
never,
I asked him first.
I've never really thought, about it, so I mean, off the dome, I would say it's, it's another construct, but just like bars and beats, there's life in there,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 12 tones in our chromatic scale, but man, we haven't figured out all the music that can play yet. That's the music's still being written. Um, so in some ways, giving a construct or a user manual to something actually kind of makes you it could be makes you better at it. Now, there's extremes, right? There are people that go way into like, okay, I'm gonna shut off the gray. I can't take it. This is what my reading of it, and I'm gonna do it only this way. And not only that, I'm gonna make sure everybody else does it this way too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those extremes, there's no gray in there. So to me, there's no fun in there. But that's just me. I mean, like to each their own. Um, has it all been good? Has it all been bad? I am in a privileged position in a way that I didn't grow up with the user manual or with the construct. Um, because like every week I hear a new sermon preached by someone who has a lifetime of experience, and I have to edit it. I take out breaths, and
Yeah.
or I put better breaths in, or like I very, I take out a lot of uhs and pauses and blah, blah, blah. So it's just very intricate and fun editing, audio editing work. But like, for instance, I just finished an episode this morning, um, and one of the great things that was said in the interview wasn't even said in the sermon. Oh no, maybe it was said in the sermon. Was don't put a period where God has put a comma,
Yeah.
right? That the comma means there's more to the story, and God uses commas a whole lot. And some congregations are prisoners of the period rather than communities of the comma. Like,
Oh,
Good
that's
line. Yeah.
an awesome thing and Ozzie Smith Jr. is the preacher for that episode, and that is, I think, going to be 2 weeks from now. Highly, like, the idea is there, like one of the coolest things about day one, I think, is that we're not trying to reconstruct anybody's faith. We're offering voices that speak meaningfully into the chaos, into
yeah.
the gray, right? And if you're wherever you are on your journey, even if you're just asking questions, which is what I do a lot, there is wisdom here for you,
Yeah.
wherever you are. So, okay, so
No,
I hope
that
that was an answer.
that was phenomenal. And I loved at the beginning you had talked about, like, and I'm so unmusical. I wish I could play anything and do anything. But you talked about there's a certain number of tones. Did you say that?
Yeah,
And
yeah. Notes. There's 12 notes in the Western chromatic scale. Yeah.
we're still exploring that, right? That's
You
been
still,
around.
yeah. I mean, there's different octaves, so it goes there. 12 notes over and over and over again. But yes, yes. Those 12 tones are pretty limitless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Katie, sometimes we can be pretty reductive and reduce Christian theology down to a number of tones and say that they're static. But I
Ooh,
love
so
this
true.
idea that, like, there's infinite numbers of possibilities and tones and things that we can do. So,
Mm.
as a person, and you could say this for your denomination, for your
Hmm.
ministry, but like, where do you see the creativity of Christianity going from a pastoral and thought leader within the space? Like,
Yeah.
you get to shape where we're going. Like, where do you hope some creative new
Yeah.
sounds come in the Christian faith?
Oh, that is, I will say my saddest moments. I'm just like, oh man, what are we doing? And where are we going? And and when I feel most discouraged, the thing that helps me is to remember I really do. I've heard other people say this. I can't quote who. We're in a compost moment for Christianity. We're in a
Hmm.
compost moment. We probably aren't going to see in our lifetime. Maybe we will. Like the kind of we're going to see little sprouts shooting, and that'll be so great, and we are so lucky that we get to be, seeing that happen. But yeah, we're in a compost moment, and like I'm not sure what's going to come. It's a really good question. um and I'm not sure what. I'm excited to. All right, here's how I'd answer it. When I think about how the theology of preaching for so many denominations has been, it is God's word to these people in this time and this place, time and
Yeah.
place found. And radio preaching, and even like Augustine's sermon when it was printed, and then there was a big hoo ha when some of the first Christian settlers to North America came over, like in their Puritan moments. Like, what? People are going to go read sermons off by themselves, not in worship.
Yeah.
What? I mean, that's just always been a recurrent thing. And then it came around again when it came to radio preaching. Like, well, what? Are people going to listen to the radio and sermons on the radio instead of going to church? To be Christian is to be in community with each other and to worship together in some way. And so I'm excited to see what comes anew now when we are entering an age when people are pretty isolated. Like we it's easier to isolate. It's easier to choose
Yeah.
and curate which things you're going to hear, and even it's easier to work and live and raise a family even with less social connections than generations before us. And I think we're there's a loss there. And I'm hopeful and curious. Yeah, but that's not a very hopeful answer. Hmm.
No, I think I actually like this idea as I grew up in Oregon, and so we love
Mm.
composting in Oregon.
Oh,
Nice.
yes.
So I do love this idea of that because it does in many ways feel like the season that we're in. And there is this always like there's this fear of what we're going to and
For
the
sure.
strategies that work and the systems that work that are
Yeah.
really like indicative of the time that we're in, and then we judge them based on where we have been, not where God is going. But then we look
Yeah.
back
Mm.
and like, man, that has become really, really fruitful. Not just in terms of like reaching people. I think sometimes we think fruit is just like mega churches,
Yep.
but and certainly God does big things through that. But like fruit can also be what is God doing behind closed doors in people's hearts and like engaging people in that way. And probably what you're seeing on a regular basis through, or maybe not even seeing because your audience is so digital, but what is certainly happening through the people that are engaging on that is like hearts are being reached and transformed
Mm.
through a way that maybe 100 years ago people would have been like, "There's no way that God could use that," right? And God is using it to engage people.
Yeah. One
Uh,
example of that, if I can just say, is we are seeing this huge spike in users, and they are not bots, in Hong Kong and in Taiwan, and
okay,
places where audiences like it's like a 2000% increase, and
wow,
but it is places where Christianity is under a good bit of threat as geopolitics stir
yeah,
up over there, and so we're trying really carefully to like connect with some colleagues here and there because that to be Christian, like is such a reminder of the privilege that we have in North America of the you could say the hegemony of Christianity or just being Christian is threatens some cultural moments here and there, but it doesn't really threaten our livelihood and our well-being and things like
yeah.
so it's interesting to think about being in community for Christians over there as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience in America, even in
Yeah,
terms of what we might
very
identify
much.
as persecution. It's like, I mean, that's small potatoes to what's
Right.
going on to other people. So,
Yeah.
but that's really cool, and that's proof that like God is doing something, right? To see areas where it
Yeah.
would be kind of suppressed, to see it
Mhm.
reaching more people, and then not just reaching people, but them sharing it with other people. And so that's
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah.
So the question I usually wrap up with is this, and I've given you no time to think about this, and so I
Mhm.
apologize, but I like to think off the cuff. But either of you can go first. Like, what would be your encouragement to someone that maybe is in the midst of deconstruction? And so, like,
Mm.
deconstruction feels isolating. It feels alone. Gray can sometimes feel pitch black when you have no idea of what's coming on the other side of it, or if you ever get out of that. It can just feel like you're meandering. A lot of Christian faiths tell people that it's their fault or their lack of faith or their lack of whatever that has got them there. And so, just as pastoral voices, like what would you encourage someone
Mhm.
that's sitting in the middle of that?
I would say that I have been helped at different moments in my journey by remembering that even when my faith doesn't feel strong, I can let others do the believing for me. I
Hmm,
really like that. And I find it helpful to remember, oh my goodness, you are absolutely not alone.
yeah,
And God's love and God's reality does not depend on your belief either. It's just always there.
yeah, I love that. I like this idea of letting others believe for. Like again, we
Yeah.
often think it's alone, like we're at this
Yeah.
alone, and whether it's shouldering burdens or shouldering beliefs, like it's like sometimes showing up to whatever that looks like is the most important thing, and like letting other people carry some of that stuff is I think such a wise word of wisdom. Haddon, what do you got? Any words of encouragement?
I feel like I'm one of the people you're talking about in some ways. I can say just we're coming up on our 50th episode, and
Oh,
so
50th episode, you mean like
I'm
because
sorry.
Danny's now I'm gonna take this moment to say, on
Okay.
June 15th will be our day 1 episode featuring Danny.
Yeah,
It will be
Yes,
episode number 4186.
it's a lot of episodes.
that
Continue,
is.
Haddon.
No, no, I just I yeah, I think like for us preaching isn't about giving all the answers. It's more about holding uh, sacred questions in public.
Hmm, I love that.
And I think that is, That is the theme song to the deconstructionist sitcom, right? That is the
Yeah,
the people who are deconstructing, just like chef. And that's another. I When you said deconstruction, I thought, oh, well, this is like being a chef.
yeah,
Like I had deconstructed guacamole in a
Oh
restaurant in
yeah.
Athens, Greece once, and it was like, oh, there's an avocado, and then there's some cilantro on the side, but
Mm.
or there's a coulis of garlic and like okay, so those are the ingredients, and the dish tasted great. It tasted,
yeah,
it still tasted good. Still tasted a little like guacamole, but yeah. So
yeah.
Katie's laughing at me in a way that
Yes.
the
My
husband in me knows. Okay, shut up now.
I so I think that's such a good. I love the deconstructed food idea too. Like, I don't think we think about
Yeah,
that a lot, but I do like this idea of like, what if preaching, but also certainly our faith was like less about finding the right answers and just asking better questions. And Jesus, I
yeah,
think, modeled this to a T in the sense that like, how many questions did he really answer? I think he like answered six and asked like 300 or something like that. And so it's like Jesus was
yeah.
far more interested in being curious than being certain. And that don't think that doesn't mean that Jesus was certain, but the things that we
Right,
have recorded about his interactions were
right.
far more curious. And that I think does tell us something. And like for us, our motto is embrace the journey, right? And so that means, and I think
Yeah,
both of you are saying those things of this idea of wherever you are, whether you feel like you're on step one or you're on the last step or you're somewhere stuck in the middle, like just embracing the journey where you are, not being alone, and looking at the ingredients and seeing like, do I get to like try something? Like, because when you have a
yeah.
deconstructed plate, maybe you only take two of the ingredients that time and you want to try those two.
Right, right.
Maybe you throw them
Good.
all together, but like, what are you
I
doing in
think
there?
you were the one that was saying about what eating the Reese's peanut butter cup upside down and backwards. Was that you? It was, and
Yep.
it
If it
was on an
wasn't me, it
it was on
certainly
an
is something
episode
I
of
do all the time.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, but the chocolate and peanut butter, man, there's probably other ways to have it. It's really
I
good.
don't remember saying that, but I am an evangelist for Reese's peanut butter cup. So it
It
does
was
Yeah,
sound
yeah.
probably you.
Yeah, you took taking the big cups
I
Oh
did say
Lord.
that.
yeah, yeah,
That is
Yeah,
yeah.
there it is.
that
See,
is
you're deconstructing in the good recipes of the world.
that's
But yeah, staying with the questions, and the
yeah.
questions are great. And the questions might lead you to gray areas where there's no certainty, and
Yeah,
that's okay, man. I think that's where the learning happens. That's where the blooming happens. But
certainly.
now I'm preaching, so
Yeah. Well, aren't we all a little bit? I mean, our lives are
yeah,
strange in some ways. So
yeah.
so I do want people to know
Mhm.
where to find you, and then maybe give more insight into kind of where you're going. But yeah, where to find you,
Yeah.
what's going on, all that
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff. And then I'll definitely put all that in the comments, both on YouTube and on Spotify. But we'll let you say them here now too.
Oh,
Yes,
you're the best.
day1.org, day1.org is the place to start. And yet I have a caveat, which is we are rebuilding our new website. There's some features of our current website that are a little difficult to navigate, and we ask for your patience while construction is occurring. But also, we all of our episodes are there, and you can just press play. Well, there's a couple
We also
clicks, and
have
you
a
can press
great
play.
YouTube presence,
Yes,
and
we do, and
of
we'll give
all
you
of
the link
our
for that.
yeah, all of our episodes are on YouTube. Day1.fm/YouTube.
Okay.
And Danny, your what did you say your episode was going to be? 4,189,
No,
87?
I said it's 4,186 is Danny's episode.
Okay, so then your URL where you can hear Danny preach a great sermon will be, and it's not ready yet, but it will be day1.fm/4186.
Okay.
This
So
is an
there
And
you
then
go.
alternate thing. There's literally like we like to make about 8 different ways you can get to the episode. You can get
Yeah,
through it
yeah.
through all podcasting platforms. You can get to it on YouTube. You can get to it on our website. And
Come
we
talk
are
to us.
continually improving. Yes, come talk
Come
to us.
yeah,
ask
Tell us
us
what you think.
questions, man.
Come subscribe to our e-newsletter, which comes just once a week on Wednesdays, and we drop the episode that is so Danny's episode is on will broadcast on radio stations across the US on Sunday, June 15th, but
mhm.
we release it the Monday before actually.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and
Yeah.
uh yeah,
So we're
because
here.
we have lots of pastors who love to because we follow lectionary, which has its pros and cons. So they will prepare their sermon in concert with what we've shared.
Is there and then so those are those places. Are you guys on places like Facebook and Instagram,
Oh, very
TikTok?
much
Like
so. Yeah.
So
where
glad you
Facebook,
asked.
Instagram, Blue Sky, SoundCloud, and LinkedIn, I believe is where we're covered. We are not on X. We are not on Threads. We are not on Pinterest. I don't know. Maybe we will be someday, but we're not now.
I
Yes.
don't know what I would even do on Pinterest. I like barely use it.
Yeah, good. It's good for recipes, man. Maybe deconstructed,
Yeah,
There
deconstructed.
we are. We're back to food.
we're
Yeah,
back.
And we're back to food.
food and music.
It
It's good
always
stuff.
goes back to food. Well, I greatly appreciate the two of you doing this with me. I think that our episode we have that's coming on day one will hopefully be a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun getting to record it with you guys. I'm excited to get to hear it as it comes out.
Yeah.
I make a habit of not listening to myself talk, but I had
Me
such a fun
too. I
time
barely
listening.
hear any of our episodes because I can't handle listening to myself talk. Yes.
Well, I
Sorry.
will
Go
say
ahead.
you have a very good podcast host voice. That was like my
Thank
first
you.
big. I was like, you do such a good job at this, even listening. Because when I talk to you in
Oh, thank
person,
you.
you talk like a normal person, and then you get into this like very soothing and inviting. It's so
Oh.
good. I was like, it made me like reevaluate my podcasting voice because like, do I not have a good one? Because yours is very good.
You have a good
Um,
one, man.
well, I
Oh,
deep voices help out, but I had so much fun with you
Yeah.
guys that I will listen to it. And this one will come out. You said ours comes out June 15th. You said.
yeah. June 15th. It'll drop on the website before that. But yeah, June 15th is like the official broadcast when it'll come
That's the
on
air
radio
date.
stations and
Yeah,
things. Yes.
so this
And Danny,
episode will come out just a little bit before that. I think it's coming out on,
Oh,
let me
good.
look at this real quick. It'll come out on June the 3rd.
Oh,
oh,
okay.
cool.
Coming right up.
Great. Good lead up. And we'll send you the links to put in the comments. Danny, this is Haddon and I have done a lot of different things. We mostly have not worked together like this. Like I have not been his boss through our 20 years. We've been through all different kinds of combos and settings and contexts and cities and
Wait,
countries.
who's the boss?
Never.
Isn't that the question?
Yeah,
Who's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, all right.
Never have we ever been asked to be on a
That's true.
podcast together
Yeah.
and talk
Okay.
about our faith journeys. This is so the
Yeah,
first of
thanks for
any of
that,
that.
man. Yeah,
Yeah, it
thanks
really
Yeah.
for
is.
doing it.
Really appreciate it, Danny.
Well, I'll tell you that you have an open invitation. So if you ever like, hey man, we left something out and you want to come back, I'll have you on anytime. This
Love
was a
it.
ton of fun.
I tell you, if
Uh,
you wanna talk about music or food or I'm dying to talk to other Christian, people about
Oh
Andor,
gosh,
which
please,
is
someone talk to him about
but
Andor. He
yeah.
can't even about
but
Empire and da 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 da.
well, yeah, Empire, and then you know he's gonna die at the end anyway, and you still go through the whole journey. I don't know, it's interesting. I don't know. There's
Somewhat, yeah. So I have not watched it, but I heard that it was like not only amazing Star Wars cinema,
peak,
uh,
yeah.
but it was
Peak.
so good for someone that even if you had no context, they take you through a journey that you could like be your first thing and you would enjoy it,
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. I'd be curious
which
to
is hard
hear
to do.
yeah, it's very hard to do, very hard to and it's just great. There's so many cool things to talk about, so
Yep.
hopefully
Next
you'll be
time.
back. Alright.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
good. Well, this has been fun. Friends, we will see you back on the Deconstruction Zone shortly. A little tease, we're going to be having a new voice on, a new story to get to walk with. But if anyone is interested in ever coming on to share a couple weeks or months or just one episode about your story, like email us and let us know. You could just email me, Danny at thewell636.org. And again, whether it's a one off or a couple months, like we want to walk through this journey with you guys. You've been faithful parts of this community. And so let us know. We'd love to have you on for a soundbite or for a couple weeks. But
Love
guys,
it.
Haddon, Katie, this was fun.
Thank you,
And we'll do
Thank
Danny.
this
you,
again later.
Danny. Okay.
Yeah.
Good
Bye.
luck. See you soon.
Bye.